Her scream was silent, but the desert heard it. The sun burned low across the Arizona plains, melting the sand into silver waves that shimmered like glass. Before we begin this journey, take a breath. Make sure you're comfortable. Pour yourself a cup of coffee. And if you believe stories like this still matter, go ahead and subscribe, because what you're about to hear might just stay with you long after the credits fade. Her scream was silent, but the desert heard it. The sun burned low across the Arizona plains, melting the sand into silver waves that shimmered like glass. Out there, where the wind spoke only in whispers, a young woman stumbled through the heat. Her name was Eliza Harlow, though nobody knew it yet. Barefoot and trembling, she clutched a torn scrap of cloth against her skin, each step carving pain into cracked earth. Dust and blood mixed at her feet, and every breath sounded like the last she'd ever take. For miles she wandered, chasing the faint memory of safety, until the outline of a ranch appeared against the light. The windmill creaked, the horses stirred, and standing by the corral, a man turned his head toward her like he'd seen a ghost rise from the sand. That man was Jonas Reed, a rancher with a past buried deeper than the mines up north. His face was lined by years of sun and silence, and his eyes carried the same quiet sorrow the land did after too many droughts. When he saw her collapse near the gate, everything in him, the loneliness, the weariness, the buried anger, moved all at once. He carried her inside, wrapped her in an old wool blanket, and set water by her side. She didn't speak for a long time. She just shook, as if her bones were remembering something she wanted to forget. And in that small cabin where the desert pressed against the walls, Jonas realized he wasn't looking at a stranger. He was looking at someone running from the same kind of hell he once knew too well. By dawn, the sky had gone from black to a pale red, and Eliza stirred for the first time. Her face was pale, her lips cracked, but her eyes, those wide, hollow eyes, were alive. She stared at the floorboards when she spoke, voice trembling so softly Jonas had to lean close just to catch it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Some truths hung heavier when left unsaid. All he heard was the weight in her words. That someone she trusted had become her tormentor, that home had turned into a prison, and that running through the desert barefoot was the only way she could find freedom again. Jonas didn't speak. He didn't swear revenge or promise safety. He just nodded once, slow and certain, like a man signing his name on a promise he intended to keep. For the first time in years, that cabin held something other than silence. The kettle hissed. The boards creaked under gentle footsteps. Eliza sat by the window, staring at the horizon as if it might change its mind and let her rest. Jonas kept watch from the porch, hand never far from the old rifle hanging by the door. But peace in the Arizona territory never lasted long. Not when evil still knew your name. That afternoon, a cloud of dust rose on the edge of the valley. A horseman approached fast, the sun flashing off a polished belt buckle and a pistol that hung too easy on his hip. Malcolm Harlow, Eliza's stepfather, rode with the kind of swagger only cowards carried. Loud, angry, desperate to control something slipping away. Jonas knew the type before the man even spoke. The kind who measured power by fear. The kind who looked at a woman like she was property, not a person. Jonas stood by the gate, arms folded, watching the man pull up and shout demands to win tore to pieces. Eliza watched from the window, heart pounding, until the man's voice cracked into rage. Then Jonas moved, calm as sunrise, firm as the ground he stood on. When the dust settled, Malcolm was on his horse again, bleeding from pride more than pain, and Jonas was still standing at the fence, unmoved. He didn't threaten him, didn't boast, just let the silence carry the warning. And as Malcolm rode off toward the hills, the air itself seemed to change, thicker, tenser, like the desert was holding its breath. The days that followed felt borrowed. Eliza helped mend fences and bring in horses, her hands still shaking at times but steadier with each sunrise. Jonas watched her learn to smile again, though her eyes still flinched at shadows. At night, he sat by the porch with his dog, staring at the stars and wondering what kind of man could break someone so young and still sleep at night. He didn't have to wonder long. Tracks showed up by the barn one morning. 2 sets of prints, heavy and deliberate. Jonas followed them with the calm of a man who'd seen too much already. He knew what they meant. Trouble was riding back, this time with company. By noon, 2 riders appeared at the ridge. One was Malcolm Harlow, red-faced and grinning like sin. The other, a silent man in a black hat, carried the posture of someone who'd killed before. Jonas recognized him from a lifetime ago, a gun hand named Vance Crowe, the kind who'd do anything for money and nothing for mercy. The men stopped at the gate. Dust swirled around them like smoke from a dying fire. Jonas said nothing. The silence pressed down heavy. Crowe's hand twitched near his revolver, but he didn't draw. Something in Jonas's stillness made him think twice. He'd heard the stories about the rancher who once ended a shootout before a man could blink. Legends like that didn't fade easy. Crowe turned his horse without a word and rode off. Malcolm cursed him, shouted threats at the wind, and finally followed, the echo of their hooves fading into the canyons. But Jonas knew what men like that were made of. They didn't quit. They just circled, waiting for the dark. That night, the desert was too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just a long, slow groan of heat settling into the earth. Jonas cleaned his rifle, checked the lock on the door, and sat in the chair by the window. Eliza slept in the next room, the soft sound of her breathing steadying something inside him. He didn't know why he cared so much, only that some burdens were too heavy to leave alone once you'd lifted them. Sometime before sunrise, the dog growled. Jonas opened his eyes and saw smoke curling past the window. The barn was burning. He was outside before the flames reached the roof. The smell of gunpowder cut through the air. From the corner of the corral, a figure stepped forward, Malcolm, wild-eyed, shouting words too broken to make sense, pistol trembling in his hand. The fire painted him in gold and red, like the devil had come to collect. Jonas didn't rush. He stepped between the flames and the cabin door, body still, voice calm. Behind him, Eliza appeared, holding a lantern close to her chest, eyes wide but no longer afraid. The desert wind carried the heat across their faces. Malcolm screamed that she was his, that no man could take what belonged to him. Jonas didn't flinch. He'd heard that kind of madness before, from soldiers, from drunkards, from the dark corners of his own memory. When Malcolm raised his pistol, Jonas moved. One shot split the morning air. The man fell hard, clutching his leg, cursing into the dirt. Jonas lowered his rifle, breathing steady, smoke curling from the barrel. The sheriff's riders arrived minutes later, drawn by the fire and the echo of the shot. Sheriff Wyatt Granger, an old friend from the cavalry days, took one look at the scene and knew exactly what had happened. Malcolm Harlow was hauled off alive, his fury finally silent. The barn smoldered behind them, but the cabin still stood. Eliza watched from the porch, her face lit by sunrise, and for the first time since Jonas had found her in the desert, there was no fear left in her eyes, only exhaustion and relief. The trial in Tombstone was short. The doctor's report, Jonas's testimony, and Eliza's quiet courage told the truth louder than any shouting could. The judge's gavel fell and justice, slow, dusty, and late, finally arrived. Malcolm was sent to labor in the territorial prison, where the sun would burn the arrogance out of him one day at a time. When Eliza walked out of that courtroom, she didn't look back. The desert that once tried to kill her now felt like open sky. She went home with Jonas to the same ranch where she'd first collapsed, but this time she walked upright, steady, her boots raising small clouds of dust that glowed gold in the light. Seasons passed. The fences mended. The fields grew green after spring rain, and laughter began to echo through the house again. The nightmares faded, replaced by soft mornings and the simple rhythm of life. Feeding horses, mending saddles, watching the sun fall behind the mountains. The land healed as they did. Jonas Reed never spoke about what he'd done. He didn't need to. The folks in town called him a fool for taking her in. Some called him a saint. But he didn't listen to any of it. He knew that real courage wasn't in the draw of a gun. It was in staying, in caring, in giving someone a chance to start over when the rest of the world turned its back. Years later, when people rode past that ranch, they'd see a woman and a man working side by side, the kind of quiet pair that didn't need words to explain themselves. Some said they'd save each other. Maybe that was true. Because sometimes the desert gives back what it takes, just in a different shape. And if you've listened this far, maybe you understand what that means. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to fight, but to stay, to stand between darkness and the light, even when nobody else will. So if this story stirred something in you, don't ride off just yet. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next tale from the Wild West. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are, because out there somewhere, another story is already waiting for you. And maybe, just maybe, it's one you were meant to hear.